Working with them for 50 years now, and all their kids are now in high school, and I'm just like, thank you so much. This is
Producer Song for stepping up this evening. Welcome everybody. Friendly reminder from our robot voice that this meeting is being recorded. Normal this time, I would generally invite folks around the room to introduce themselves, but that's actually going to be the next item of business. So we're going a little in a slightly different order. Josh, if you want to, okay, you have that. I'm not sure that's what the folks on my side can see too. Just to give folks an overview, because this is a little bit different than our typical CWAC evening. We're kind of broken into two main sections. So from now until 6:30, we have time with our new general manager, kind of a getting to know you, getting to know all of us. And then at 6:30, we'll start and transition into the design and construction standards public forum. Let's see. I think those are the main things for right now. I'll have announcements at the end of the evening, but with that, I'll gavel us into our next item.
Thanks, Elizabeth. For our first order of business, we have an introduction to the new Clean Water Services General Manager, Rahim Harjeet. Elizabeth.
All right, one more little bit of talking. So excited to welcome Rahim to our June CWAC meeting. He's been here less than 10 days. So you're getting him piping hot, fresh. And we knew that it was going to be really important for Rahim to come to CWAC early. All are very important to us as our advisory commission, have tremendous depth of knowledge and experience. And I am hoping that we could go around the room and have folks introduce themselves, what seat you sit in for CWAC and how long you've served, and then turn it over to Rahim to do some introductions, maybe even ask you all a quick question too.
Terry Song, currently the District 3 representative. I joined CWAC in 2000 as a business rep. Done 2 stints, couple terms as chair. Today I'm just substitute as chair. Welcome aboard.
You talked earlier. I'm Drake Butch. I work for the First American Title, and I'm the director 2 for builder developer. I've served before in the past and been very active in watching all this through the Home Builder Association over the years.
Stu Peterson, business guy. I think I'm on my 3rd term.
You're 2.5.
2.5 terms.
Feels longer, right?
It's your 3rd term.
Elaine Stewart. I'm an environment rep, retired ecologist. I'm also an elected director on the board of the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation.
Ashley Carroll, I'm one of the business reps. I've been on the board for just over a year, I think. I don't remember what month. I think it's just
Andy Haugen, District 4 rep, and I've been here since 2022.
Lakshmi Tata, Agriculture 1 rep, and I have been here since just like very recently. I don't remember now. Is it like January, February, or was it a little bit more than that? But I have a small farm in Helvetia called Edible Stories Market Garden. We grow culturally significant crops for the Asian population.
It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm Rahim Harjeet, the new general manager. Like Elizabeth said, 8-10. So I'm spending and prioritizing my first few weeks just getting to know the work we do better, getting to meet our staff. And like Elizabeth said, I thought it was important to come here and just introduce myself and just get to know you all a little bit more. So I'll share a little bit of my experience. Prior to joining CWS, I was the deputy city manager at the city of Hillsborough. Most of my work was overseeing the infrastructure, utilities, and growth, economic development portfolios, and also the fire department. So there's a little outlier. I led a lot of the city strategic planning work over the last few years. But prior to my time in Hillsborough, I was in Florida for a long time. My most recent job before coming here was an assistant county administrator for Pinellas County. Pinellas County is on the west coast of Florida. It's where Tampa Bay area is. So I'm very close to water, very passionate about it all my life. I was, as an assistant county administrator, I oversaw the utilities department, which was wastewater, drinking water, and reuse water. We had a pretty built out reuse system as well. So I was familiar with the plants, familiar with water distribution and reuse distribution as well. I also oversaw the public works department, which had the typical transportation, traffic, all that kind of stuff. But we also oversaw environmental management for the entire community, entire county. So I'm familiar with NPDS permitting and other permit requirements that we needed to. Also saw our waste to energy plant at our landfill, solid waste department, parks department, and our office of asset management. So I bring a lot of stormwater background because that's how I grew up in the industry. I was a stormwater engineer for a couple of jurisdictions down there. And everything floods in Florida, so it was good job security. But my wife and I wanted to move to the Pacific Northwest for quite some time because we were tired of the humidity and mosquitoes. So when the Hillsborough job opened up, we moved out here, and yeah, it's two of us and a dog, and we like spending time outdoors. So I'm just glad to be part of the CWS team.
You had a lot of saltwater experience down there too? I bet you did.
Yep.
I don't know the area.
Yeah. Yeah, climate change is a big issue there too with the sea level issues. Yeah. Job security if you're a stormwater engineer in Florida. Yeah, and like Elizabeth said, I was just hoping to get to know you all some more. And I didn't really have any prying questions apart from maybe one overarching one. You know, CWAC is an advisory group to the board. How do you think that's working? And what opportunities do you think exist or we should consider to make that work better? I was just curious about. So I'm a pretty direct person, so I was hoping you could share your candid feedback with me as well. But that was my overarching question. Any thoughts to share?
You invited to speak out, and so I don't have any bark about it. Damon's been real good about reaching out. Joe Paul has as well, and you know, you hear from those guys. On so that I'm in the business community and the development community. Shut up, like you're going there. You know, those guys, once they find out I'm on the board, I'm a firebrand, you know. They ask me what I can do, you know, what do you know about this, what do you know about that? And I say, well, it really, most of the time, it's not CWS's problem, it's the local jurisdictions. They interpret things incorrectly. That's been my experience. But like I say, when we're always asked to speak out and say stuff, so I feel like it's pretty good.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, like Elaine, Stu, and I were on a couple of subcommittees for like the West Basin Master Plan. And, we met several times with the people in charge of that. And, they very much listened to our feedback and try to incorporate our thoughts or changes to the policy. And, I think it's, in addition to the larger group, it's nice because it's like you guys actually listen and try to take into account, the opinions that people bring, right? And try to incorporate them rather than just sort of being like, oh yeah, and never do anything about it, right? So I think overall it's been great. I had to decide if I wanted up for a second term. And I chose to in large part because of things like that, right? Yeah.
But it takes about 2 to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that's kind of true. You're swimming here for the first.
Yeah, I was on the Wallaton River Watershed Council for a couple of terms. And it was a good way to learn the watershed. That board, so, but it did take me a little bit of time. What you saying?
Yeah, learned lots since I got on here.
One thing about this advisory commission is I don't feel like we necessarily advise the board very often. I'm really pleased with all the interactions with staff and all the work that gets done here on the ground. I think Stu brought up a really good point about how long it can take to come up to speed. You know, one of the things, if you look at the agendas, at least when I recall the meetings that I've been 2 or 3 years now, I forget how long. Most of them are information, you know, very little of soliciting feedback on something, and certainly not on policy level things. Now, that's at the board's discretion, you know, maybe they don't want that. But yeah, I just find that kind of a curious thing. But I am just kind of coming up to speed to figure out what all this organization does. And so that's why I told Elizabeth I'd go ahead and apply for another term as well.
You're 3 years ahead of me. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have background in here.
Yeah, I do. How about the rest of the team? I think for me, the opportunities I've had, business rep, it's to bring the experience I've had on the business side. The neighborhood representative is a little tougher. I don't go out and canvass my neighborhood to see what their issues, what our services are. But the biggest opportunity is more half of the budget committee in our services from CWAC. That's a really good opportunity to get into overall financials and workings. Tonight's presentation on design construction standards is the next big opportunity to have input. I think from 6 years I've been on it, those are I'm most interested and I think had the most input on.
I think there is a tension between whether we just listen or whether we help set change. And but like with the standards we'll see today, we've been involved in setting up, and with the budget, those are ones where we really do. And you know, I'm fairly new again, but I can see those are places where we play a role, but it is always kind of this just here to hear tonight. Or were you really supposed to get, are we supposed to tell you we don't think that's a good idea? So, and I think there's always going to be that push pull, and that's part of not being the actual.
And there's always going to be items where, hey, we're just sharing information, and some where we are looking for more feedback and we have the ability to change based on it. That's good.
I think some of us with the business end, we have that ability to do that outreach easier than somebody who represents a district.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I can call on associations and business groups to come together and say, does this really work or not?
Yeah.
When it's this technical. And so it really does, we get to be that kind of center of disbursement.
Michelle Rahim.
Sorry, I'm a little late. I'm herding cats at home today, so I was not going to come at all, but I said I can still make it. And Stan is new.
Yeah, my name is Rahim. I'm the new general manager.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for me, or what do you want me to
I
share?
was just looking for some general feedback on how things are going with the CWAC group. How do you feel it was like the effectiveness has been?
I believe he's going to time me, but I'll take it just a few minutes. Oh, fantastic that you want to be on board at some point. I got into this about 8 years back. I took an early retirement from Intel after a successful and long career. I think my curiosity was, how does these institutions work? Everything from the Beaverton City Council to the police department, just to know the other side of the table. I've always been the one who complained about traffic lights and bombs and everything. So I got elected to the Westlaw Water Board as one of the commissioners. After a couple of years there, I was saying this way, saying this is the other side of water. Whatever. The main thing that I try to get out of these meetings is that, like some of my colleagues have already shared, we are an advisory body. don't think we can really set any concrete steps or directions, or I've tried, not that Kathy Needle will tell you how much I've tried the budget meetings. But for me, this is a forum where I can express some feedback. Sometimes it's from me as an individual who is consumer, the same products that you give. And I've made it a habit to go sit in our NAC meetings very often. I do hear some things from the ground. It's not the full-fledged feedback, but I try to bring those things here. I try to question and challenge a lot of the proposals and suggestions they gave. Even if half a percent or a percent of that feedback gets into the system, I believe I've fulfilled the role here. I know I've not been a very popular person for that. I must have a couple of occasions, but you'll hear from your staff that give this feedback. We have these questions we dig deeper. Sometimes they're reasonable, sometimes they're rhetoric, sometimes they're unreasonable. As long as there is a voice that we have in the way things go, I feel happy. I feel it is worth it more than the dinner again. Thank you. Hope that helped.
It does. Thank you. Appreciate that feedback. Anyone else?
I just want to recognize that we have two of our members online, Nisha George and Mark Farrar. So give them the opportunity if they want to introduce themselves and share any input at this point. I think Mark just was able to get in out of the waiting room. Sorry, Mark. Sort of open question was, any observations or advice or feedback on CWAC, your role on CWAC and its position as an advisory commission. Hopefully I didn't butcher that too much.
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
And maybe they can introduce themselves.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nisha.
Hi, I'm Nisha George. I'm a rep at large. This is my second term. I live in Tualatin. I used to live in Bethany during my first term. I kind of echo what Elaine and some of the other members have said. It's taken a while to kind of absorb all of the things that CWS does. And it's pretty incredible to learn about how detailed everything is and how well it works. But I would agree that I think a lot of the information is presented as more of like here's what you should learn about versus here's like a problem that we're wrestling with and where can we tap into the backgrounds of folks on the advisory committee to provide some input to help us, detangle some problems. Everyone at CWS is really smart, so maybe they don't need that help. But I think it would be something that this group is really excited to do if given that opportunity. Kind of like what Annie said, I had the opportunity to serve on the budget committee. It was nice to be on these subcommittees to get kind of a deeper dive into things. And I appreciate that opportunity. I don't have a lot of communication with the board once I got selected. So I don't know what the board necessarily wants from us either. I would love to have more conversations, I guess, with the board if that's something that they want. I think the other thing that hasn't been touched on is there's a lot of things that CWS does as a proactive measure. And it feels like they're ahead of the game in a lot of respects of treating water and noticing what is coming in and making sure that we have the cleanest water possible that's going into the Tualatin. I live right next to it, so I very much appreciate that. But it also feels like there's not a lot of teeth that Clean Water Services has to influence what should be going in the water. It maybe is my perception, but it feels like there is not a lot that they are allowed to do on saying like maybe we shouldn't dump lots of chemicals in backyards and that border the river or like feed directly into the watershed. But it's more of a catch up game on that. So I would love to see that part get a little bit more teeth for Clean Water Services in the future, but I'm not sure how to do that. I think that's all I had, but welcome, and I thank you for introducing yourself and coming to this meeting on your first couple weeks.
Thank you, Nisha. I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, I'll second that. Welcome, congratulations, and best of luck. It's been a great learning experience to be on CWAC. I happen to have been now in the development industry for just about 7 years, but I was in telecom before that, and I was actually started out as an assistant city manager in city government. So I've got a little perspective on the role of government and what we can and can't do and should and shouldn't do. And that's maybe where some of the challenge comes in for CWAC, is that word advisory in the title of the organization. When I first joined, I thought it was the members advising CWS about things from their perspective. And I think I've kind of gone a 180 on that. And it certainly, I think, as Nisha just said, it feels more like it that the advising is CWS advising us about what's going on. So maybe having at some point you help with Elizabeth and Joe and whoever lead a clarifying exercise or expectation exercise, and maybe that involves the board. I don't know. I think from what I've heard in my short tenure, that would be a helpful and useful exercise to go through so that it's clear what exactly this group should be doing and shouldn't be doing, and just kind of expectation setting. So again, welcome, congratulations, and I look forward to working with you. Sorry I couldn't be there in person.
Thank you, Mark. Any other feedback before we transition? I really appreciate that. It's not going to be my last time here unless I get fired in the next 2 years. But yeah, Elizabeth and I can regroup and figure out a way to maybe address some of the things you brought up. Appreciate it.
I'll speak out of turn again. This is an offer I've made before. It's an offer to you also. Is any feedback that you think that was can be given? It doesn't have to wait for this monthly meeting. If we reach us out on the phone or email, if we can provide any input, it will be done. Wait for this monthly.
Thank you.
We have a couple minutes. If there's anything that was surprising to you, or that you think, if you were on your first week on the job, what you wish you had known, especially for folks that have been here a little bit. Rapid fire.
It's amazing how little interaction we have with the commissioners. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be advising, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think in my time here, till we had the controversy, I never saw. Yeah, when we had some issues, yeah. I mean, I've never seen Jerry here or any of those guys. He didn't even know I was on the long story. But it just doesn't seem like they're very involved with us.
If they'd be willing, we're going to have a new chair on the county commission this year, and whoever that is, maybe we could invite them for a conversation.
Well, Nafisa came through here.
You did?
Yeah, she joined. He was with me, I think, when I came. Actually, she came out. Yeah, that was kind of a grooming, I thought.
Hearing better connection with the commissioners. So maybe some role play and, not just being a a place where we bring stuff to you and tell you here's what it is, but a place where we get meaningful feedback on stuff and don't bring things that are fully baked to the meeting.
And, I want to echo, Andy, I think it was you that mentioned how useful the time on the budget committee was. And that's where, we do spend a day with board and we have back and forth conversations. And I know at least, maybe not so much this year, but last year, the participation of CWAC members influenced the policy decision.
And we can't do much about the science because we don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, the science is what most of this is about to me, which is great. And I think that's fun to listen to, watch it, but we can't input on that. Or I don't have that capacity.
I don't think that machine measures PFAS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a chemist. How about them bears? I mean, it comes right over my head. So, but it's, I think it's fascinating. Don't get me wrong. I think it's great. That's what I like learning about it. So I can explain that to people that they ask me about it. And I go, you guys don't understand how much science there is treating this water. And that the ordinance comes down from the feds. And if you don't have CWAC to deal with the feds, and that usually appeases everybody.
Yeah. Don't want to deal with the feds.
Nobody wants to deal with the feds, right? Exactly.
This is really good feedback, and maybe Elizabeth, you and I can chat. See how to move from there. Thank you. It's a pleasure meeting all of you.
Yeah, thanks.
We'll now transition to the public forum for design and construction standards update, stormwater revision. Note the flow indicated on the slide on the screen. There'll be a staff presentation followed by an opportunity for people to ask questions related to the presentation. We ask that you hold questions on the presentation till the end. Next, the design and construction standards subcommittee will report out to the full CWAC and invite any discussion. Following any discussion on the subcommittee report, we will then open up anyone who has signed up, provide them. Elizabeth, you could walk us through the process for sign up and providing testimony.
You got it. So there's a sign up sheet in the back of the room for those folks that are in person. And for those online, if you want to just put in the Zoom comments, include your name and any organizational affiliation. And I just want to note, this doesn't end up being a conversation back and forth. So you won't, if you ask a question, you might not get an answer directly this evening, but staff is collecting all of these comments. And we will be including responses along with the comments that we receive online and through the online portal at the time of the next draft release. We're trying to keep comments to 5 minutes per person, but depending on time, I think we may have a little bit of flexibility this evening. And as always, there's always an opportunity to submit written comments through online forum, through email. We'll also throw up a QR code so that folks can easily access the.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I am now going to turn things over to Damon Reishi, Planning and Development Services Division Manager.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Damon.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the public forum for the 2026 stormwater revision to our design and construction standards. Let's see, I think I have the ability to change that. Before I get started, I just wanted to introduce a few other people in the room that are core members of this team. There's a lot of people working on this revision, as you're going to hear about here in a bit, but there's been a few people that are involved with it, at least on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis. So first, I'd like to introduce Elle Warline. She's our development and permitting manager. There. Another person on our team that's really kind of keeping track of comments and making sure everything goes where it needs to is Megan Comer. Also, we have an outside consultant from Brown and Caldwell that has been helping us on all the technical issues because I'm not an engineer, but she is. That's Krista Reniga. And then finally, with our communications piece, Shannon Huggins over here, actually assisting this evening with comments from online. So it takes a lot of people to pull this off. A lot of times my name gets associated with the revisions, the design and construction standards. There's a lot of other folks involved. All right, so the sort of overview of the presentation, I want to start out this evening just with a little bit of a brief background about our stormwater program to provide some context for what this revision's about, where it fits in our program. Then I'm going to talk about the drivers for the revision, our engagement process with stakeholders, and the timeline. Then we'll get into a little bit of technical, not really, but need to talk about retention and green infrastructure because these are core to the revision requirement. And finally, I'll go through a little bit of how the initial public draft is structured. So to start, it's always good to talk about what is Clean Water Services district area? What's our area of responsibility? And it's really the urban portion of Washington County, roughly the UGB boundary. There's a little bit of Clackamas County and Multnomah County that are included, but all of our area flows to the Tualatin River. We've got 12 cities within our jurisdiction that are co-implementing jurisdictions. 7 of those cities help implement a lot of our local program, including they implement the design and construction standards. We're a little bit different than some of our neighboring jurisdictions in terms of how our stormwater system works. We have a municipal separate storm sewer system, or you might hear it referred to as an MS4. What that means is that we have a collection system, pipes, and treatment that's just for stormwater. And that runs parallel in many cases with our sanitary system, also has collections, conveyance, and treatment. It's different than what you hear about, say, City of Portland, where you'll hear them talk about a combined system, where in many places the storm goes into the sanitary, causes some kinds of problems that we don't have. You hear about overflows of sanitary sewer. Having the stormwater separate helps with those kind of issues. So it's a little bit different than what you hear about often on the news with Portland. Our MS4 is one of the storm system is one of the discharges that's approved under our watershed-based permit. We've got 4 other discharges that are approved under that permit, and that's for our wastewater treatment facilities or water resource recovery facilities. The stormwater is a little different than those. Those are each point source discharges. Stormwater discharges in lots of places throughout our jurisdiction. Sometimes that can be a sheet flow discharge. Sometimes it's happening right out at the end of a pipe or a facility. So looks a little bit different than the discharges from the treatment plants. The stormwater program has a lot of different components to it and documents. We have a management plan for how we go about implementing permit requirements. There's standards around and metrics for what we have to do with our stormwater plan to demonstrate that we are accomplishing what the plan requires. We file a report every year to say how successful we have been or what we may have missed with meeting those metrics in the previous year. And there's other documents as well, but the design and construction standards is one of those documents that our permit requires us to have some mechanism for having rules around what we call post-construction runoff control. So these are the stormwater program elements that show up in our permit. There's a lot of different pieces. Not going to talk about all of these tonight, although this meeting falls into the public involvement and participation piece, because this is an opportunity for the public to voice comments about an activity we're doing with our stormwater program. But what we're really going to focus on tonight is that third to the bottom bullet, the post-construction site runoff for new development and redevelopment. And what that's really about is the permits requirements for us to provide stormwater management of runoff from development. And that's the development that has occurred. There's different requirements for the runoff that's happening while construction is occurring. So this is specific to what gets built out and how is stormwater managed when it leaves those new impervious areas that are created. So we have current stormwater standards, and we've had them for over 30 years. Well, they've evolved a lot over 30 years, but we've had some sort of standard with Clean Water Services, or formerly Unified Sewerage Agency, for over 30 years. And basically they're contained primarily in Chapter 4 of our design and construction standards. There's some stuff that relates to it in definitions in Chapter 1, and we have details in the appendices, but really the heart of it lives in Chapter 4. And there's currently 3 kind of key pieces. There's a water quality treatment section that talks about how pollutants, what you build to remove pollutants from the stormwater. There's a low impact development approaches section. This is very akin to green infrastructure. We'll talk a lot more about that in a minute. And then there's a section around hydromodification. Hydromodification is really that volume management piece. And in particular in our permit, the goal of that comes back to water quality. So as you create more and more impervious surface, the water that falls on that, rather than soaking into the ground, can run off faster. As it runs off faster, then it has an impact on the channels. It actually causes erosion. That sediment that gets into the water column can be a water quality hazard for fisheries in particular. Hydromodification isn't really part of this permit requirement. It can be a little bit confusing because we're going to talk about retention as a requirement, but hydromodification is something that we updated in 2019, and our permit basically says keep it the way it is, keep doing that program the way you have it. So the drivers for this revision, as I've probably hinted at a little bit already, is our watershed-based permit. And so we're really just trying to bring our standards into alignment with what our permit that we got in 2022 requires. That permit requires that we, by November 1st of 2026, so this year, that we incorporate a prioritization of on-site retention or local regional retention of stormwater and pollutant removal, including developing a design storm. And there's some pieces around that we'll talk about in a bit. And then it also requires that we prioritize green infrastructure before hardscape controls like filter vaults or offset programs like fee and lieu. For those that may not know, fee and lieu is basically a program where if you're not doing something on site, applicant pays a fee as part of their mitigation for the stormwater management, and then the jurisdiction collecting that money implement some sort of on the ground mitigation with that money that ultimately offsets the impact that had occurred. So a little bit about stakeholder engagement and what our process has been and where we're going. We really started with a staff technical working group that's made up of our core CWS staff, but also a broader group of folks at Clean Water Services that are cross-departmental. But it also included city staff from all of our larger cities that implement the local program. And that's because they're the ones doing the design and construction standard implementation in their jurisdiction. Applicants submit to them, they review against the design and construction standards, and then they issue the permits. And then I introduced Krista from Brown and Caldwell earlier. She's really been our technical help in trying to pull all this together, understand it. And I'm a biologist, I'm not an engineer, so it's very helpful to have engineers on the team that can help work through this. Then one of the first places we came after we got board approval to move forward was this group, the Clean Water Advisory Commission. And one of the things that we heard, much like you've let Raheem know this evening, is that there was a desire for this body to have more direct involvement and input in the projects that we're working on. So what we decided to do was create a subcommittee. And I think 4 of the 5 of you are here this evening. And that subcommittee we've so far met with twice and fed you a lot of very technical information to try to help you understand what we were working on, and then talk through some of the different considerations we had around design storm and what infeasibility criteria might be for both green infrastructure and retention. And we're going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. Beyond that, we've done targeted stakeholder outreach. And that was actually a recommendation from CWAC, and some of these specific groups were even recommended by CWAC. So we've got a meeting set up for next week with the Home Building Association of Portland. And then about 2 weeks ago, we met with the Tualatin River Keepers and did a presentation. We've also met with a couple different groups from land use and transportation at Washington County, but in particular, the Capital Group that builds roadways. Figuring out how to fit stormwater into linear projects is always a challenge. They're a little bit different type of project than, say, a subdivision or a business park. And we've also been reaching out and hope to meet with the West Side Economic Alliance. And we're open to meet with other interest groups if they like. So we're at the public forum this evening, but the other thing that we've done that is one of our bigger efforts to try to get the word out to the broadest group of folks we can is an email distribution list through contact. And we created a little over 1,000, it came up with a little over 1,000 interested party emails. One of the main places that we got that is we went back into our permitting system, looked back about 5 years to see who are applicants and engineers and contractors that we've been working with that have been submitting to us. So we put them on there, and we've reached out to other groups as well. We used some of our lists that from back in 2019 where we knew there were interested parties. So we got that email out recently. Around May 18th, we sent it out to announce the initial draft being released. We heard from the subcommittee that none of them had seen that email, and as it turns out, we didn't get the CWAC committee on that email list. But I think subsequently we've got that distributed. But it got me thinking a little bit. I wonder who else might not be seeing this, and I got nervous. But what I found is that we could check analytics on who is clicking or receiving the email. So we can both see whether an email was delivered to an address, and also we can tell how many of the emails we sent out actually were opened. And what we found out is nearly half of them were opened. And that doesn't sound very good to me. It's like 50% that's failing. But what the communications folks tell me is that's a really, really high click rate for a campaign like this. Yeah.
Well, one thing I would clarify is that there were thousands-ish individual emails, and about 200 of them bounced back. So people left positions or for one reason or another. So out of the 800 remaining, 500 open. So that's really good.
Okay. Well, I recall when CWAC suggested that instead of just email or instead of just having them come, I think my memory may be bad, that there's also going to be a web page where you can.
There is.
Right?
Absolutely. And that email that went out has that web page. Maybe at the end here we can show it, but there is a project specific web page, and we actually have a QR code that'll show up at the end of the presentation that takes you to it. But that has information about the project itself, the background, links to important information like our permit. It also has all of the presentations that we've done that have been recorded. They're posted on YouTube. And then of course it has the drafts.
My interest was, apart from the clicks and the opens, what's been the substantial feedback or inputs from any of these methods?
So far, we haven't received a whole lot of feedback. I think that the initial draft has been out about 3 weeks, and we haven't received a lot of feedback through the website, I should say. We've received feedback from the subcommittee, certainly received feedback when we met with TRK, and I expect that we will from the home builders as well, and we have from Washington County.
A little early to expect anything significant.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Too early to expect anything significant?
Not certain. I mean, it is early, but whether it's too early, I don't know.
And I think there was also one more suggestion made that instead of just waiting for them to respond, can we do like a push and specifically solicit? Was that done too?
So we're thinking about working on a few other ideas we can do to get more eyes on it, more awareness. Raheem actually suggested the other day that maybe we add a tagline to our signature blocks within our planning and development services group, so that the folks we're working with all the time see that. We'll probably do some more targeted outreach to other groups. So.
And I got to ask you, you said that, you're working with the cities because they are the people that issue the permit. We're always talking to you. I mean, the city guys always tell me, well, we got to see what Clean Water says about it. And they send the plan to you guys, I mean, every time. So we're always hanging around. As I mentioned before, we get a lot of delays and hangups. And what I've found in, I think, all three instances I've looked into this is the city people did not did not submit proper information to CWAC, to CWS. And Yeah, that's kind of, so it's always like it's you guys that issue the permit, in my opinion. I mean, that's who we have to go through.
Well, there's definitely a process around that. You're not incorrect in that the majority of our cities, after they've completed their reviews, feel like they're have a permittable project, they send it to us for what we call oversight review. There's other reasons they send stuff along for the 1200C state permit as well. That's related to erosion control.
That's all you guys.
But a lot of the interaction, I think, is between the cities and the applicant. We work really hard to try to support the reviewers at the cities so that things are all figured out sort of through them. We prefer not to be directly working with the applicants within the city. So we try to keep it all at the.
I never had a development where you guys didn't have to annoy it. I mean, it's just, there's no getting around it. I mean, it always comes back to see, you know, the thing's done, it's sent off to you guys and then, you know, waiting for it to come back. And like I say, I found out before they didn't submit the correct information. You guys gotta tell them that, by the way.
Sure, like my time recently in Hillsborough, we've been working with, excuse me, Clean Water Services to try to be more efficient on how we do that. So I think there's some realization that there's improvements we need to do there. I can just share from my time there most recently that Damon and his team are taking more of an audit approach, right? Like you guys are already doing the review, you don't have to review it twice. Just take what you say is done. Accepting.
A lot of people in the city where I work, they don't really understand what they're supposed to do.
I've been like that for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes they're new. They've never interfaced with clean water and they really don't know what to clean water about it. Frustrating for the engineers on the private side, right? That do know what they do. And that's a pretty common experience.
I appreciate the feedback, but I disagree respectfully. Just from my time, again, I'm speaking from my time in Hillsborough, you have staff there who know what they're doing. And they have been working very collaboratively with,
And they've been there a long time.
there've been a few new folks too.
Right, well, I get troubles with you guys.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, it's always a learning curve, but I'm biased towards Hillsborough too, so
Hillsborough is a pretty efficient place.
yeah, so, but yeah, there's always room for improvement.
Absolutely. And there's a range too, right? Sure that there are some reviewers at cities that are new and not as experienced, but we work with a lot of folks from the cities that are pretty on
Yeah,
top of
Sherwood's
it.
guys are really good. And but you know, there's been such a revolving door of these people going through. You know, that it really is coming back to you because.
Well, just to highlight the experience from some of the cities, there's staff from Hillsborough and Beaverton played a really big role in helping actually write parts of this draft. So I probably should have mentioned that a little bit more, but we had a meeting with a couple of folks from those cities along with the core team that I mentioned earlier, and they contributed quite a bit of written material to the draft that is published. So there's a lot of good experts of the cities as well.
Beaverton, Hillsborough, there you said.
In this case, but the other cities have folks with some really knowledgeable people as well.
Maybe after you take a breath from this, and that's, to me, that's a whole separate thing.
Yeah.
Might not be a bad topic for us to touch on about how that collaboration works and whether you have training and with all the cities.
Yeah. You're thinking after we finish the.
Yeah, you should get to finish this first.
Thank you.
David, yeah, we'll let you finish the presentation. We are on a timeline. So anyone, if you hold your questions to the end of this presentation, please.
So really, this timeline doesn't show everything. We had been talking about figuring out what we were going to do for years before this timeline started. And in fact, the rainfall analysis was completed before this timeline starts. But officially, we went to the board at the beginning of December 2025, and then we've been working with that technical group to figure out all the components so that we could put a draft out to the public. That happened on May 18th. And we've met with the board once to provide them a sort of a progress update as to how we were doing. And that brings us to our public forum this evening. We anticipate that we will have another draft that's an informal draft like this initial one. Already we've found a lot of things that we will need to correct. Anytime you draft a document, especially a technical document like this, there's all kinds of little things that you miss. And as you read through it, realize, oh, well, that doesn't work or that doesn't make sense. So we've found a number of those, and we're interested in feedback, and we'll continue to make improvements. Part of the reason for doing another public informal draft is that that gives us an opportunity to then make further improvements before we take something to the board in a more formal setting. When we go to the board, that is also a public hearing, but we really like to have most of the concerns and problems ironed out before we do that. So right now we are targeting hopefully early fall to go to the board, but we have a little bit of padding in there because we need to have something adopted before November 1st in order to be in compliance with our permit. And I'll just note, it's got these public comment periods on the bottom. Really, the public comment period is open the entire time. You can submit comments at any time. As we go through this process, we'll be looking at those and trying to incorporate changes. I think we've said that for the first draft that really the end of this week, we would like comments back because we're going to really start working on that next draft, but we'll continue to try to incorporate those changes as we go. So coming back to some of the technical, just to go through what's required a little bit different way. The permit says first prioritize retention, which I'm also going to use the word infiltration. That's going to be the primary mechanism that we will have retention occur. So if I say infiltration or retention for this purposes, can kind of consider that to be the same thing. So first priority is try to retain. If that isn't feasible, then we have to provide treatment, the cleaning of that water. If that's not possible, then you can go to an offset program like a fee in lieu. So that's kind of the hierarchy that the permit lays out. And then it also says that for all of this, you need to prioritize green infrastructure. So most retention opportunities are through green infrastructure. Water quality, there's some options around that. And I'll talk about a couple examples of green versus gray infrastructure, but we'd want to do treatment through green first, then gray. If that's not feasible, then again, it would be in lieu, which in our jurisdiction, more often than not, will result in green infrastructure. And then hydromodification is something that we're not touching with this revision process, so it's off to the side. So to get a little bit more specific about what we needed to do in order to meet these required changes, we had to come up with a numerical stormwater retention requirement. This is really a design storm. In order to do that, we updated our rainfall analysis. Our previous rainfall analysis kind of ended in 2008. So now it goes through 2022. got that information. There were about 3 different methods that the permit said that you could use in order to come up with a NSRR or this design storm for retention. The permit also said that for water quality, you had to update the design storm to represent at least capturing and treating 80% of that average annual runoff. Turns out that that is also one of the options that the permit allows for the retention design storm. So what we ended up electing to do is to have a retention design storm and a water quality design storm that are the same. It's that capture and treat 80% of the average annual runoff volume. I'm not going to get into the details about how that's calculated, but if you're interested, that's something you can reach out and you can see the results of in the actual draft. The other thing we needed to do is come up with a feasibility criteria around both that retention treatment piece as well as the green infrastructure piece. Just a little bit of information about facilities and how retention works and soils. So up here we've got drawings of a couple of different facility types. We've got a planter that's non-structural on the left. A lot of folks will call these rain gardens. And on the right, we have a facility that is a formal planter. Both of them work about the same way. They have a special media in them, plants grow in them. There's rock underneath them. They can have a drain that connects as an overflow. And the idea is that after the water moves through that treatment layer, that then it gets into the native soil underneath. You can have different kinds of soils in different areas. You can have really sandy or loamy soils that are classified or described as being type A or B soils. You can also have soils that are really clayey and water doesn't move through those clay soils as well, and those are classified as C or D type soils. I promise that's going to make more sense in a while. One more thing I'll say about the soil, sorry. In urban Washington County, the vast majority of the soils that we have are those really clayey, tight soils that don't allow for infiltration. So this retention requirement becomes a little bit of a challenge in our jurisdiction, just because it's hard to get that water into the soil very quickly. So treatment infrastructure, I've mentioned green versus gray. On the left-hand side is one of our traditional vegetated treatment swales. It's got plants in it and soil, water moves through it, and through the interaction with the plants and the soil, the water basically gets filtered. On the right-hand side is a filter vault that's got a number of canisters in it. Those are those round things that you can see. Those canisters have media in them that as water goes through it, the system also filters out pollutants. So they both kind of work the same way. They filter pollutants out. There's a lot of pros and cons to each. The green infrastructure takes up more space on the landscape. And the gray infrastructure is or can be built in a parking lot or put in a parking lot. You can walk right across the top of it. You probably have, didn't even realize it was there. So it's more space efficient. They both have challenges around maintenance. The gray infrastructure, because it's underground, it's kind of easy to forget about it, maybe not necessarily realize that it's failing, whereas the vegetated facility, it becomes pretty apparent when it's not working. So pros and cons to each. They both have their place and their use. This is just an example of various types of green infrastructure or what we've called low impact development approaches. And I just put this up because a lot of times folks wonder what green infrastructure is, and most of the time it does include some sort of green component like plants, but not always. That top right corner is porous pavement. There's a combination of a porous asphalt and porous concrete, and water is able to move through that. And that is also considered green infrastructure, even though it's mostly gray. So the initial public draft, what we ended up coming to as a proposal is that we would do a water quality design storm that's also our retention design storm of 1 inch in 24 hours. That meets the 80% average annual runoff requirement. The draft incorporates this new retention concept, which we haven't had previously. Also, the water quality design storm is quite a bit different in terms of, seems like it's different in size. It's really in sizing the facilities doesn't work out different, but it's a little bit different methodology. And then we also included a number of infeasibility criteria around both that retention and green infrastructure requirement. And we had to think about where would we want infiltration, and what are situations where either a vegetated facility or infiltration might be challenging, and how do we sort of document that? That's what I'm going to go through next as sort of, this is a rough approximation of how some of the subsections in chapter 4 got laid out. And we don't necessarily start with infiltration and green infrastructure as the first thing to consider, which maybe is a little bit counterintuitive when you look at the permit, but I think that it makes a lot of sense from when you're trying to sort which bucket your particular project might need to fit into. So the first thing is we need to figure out is there's this preference for green infrastructure and infiltration on site. Very first situation where we wouldn't necessarily have you do that is if we have some sort of sub-basin plan or master plan where we've already thought and planned for how we're going to do that retention, meet that retention requirement, and basically have the development just plug into that. So this would be at a community scale, and we've identified where that stormwater can get to in order to get that treatment and infiltration. And you basically, in that case, pay a regional stormwater management charge. There are also situations where there might incidentally be a water quality or retention facility nearby that was sized such that it has capacity for your development, maybe a neighboring development oversized a facility. It doesn't happen real often, but it does occasionally happen. In those cases, rather than building another facility next door, try to utilize that existing facility. And they would just pay a fee in lieu in that case. There are also situations where we might not want infiltration on site because of what's going on in that location. Might be a floodway, or there's topographic constraints that make it difficult to get the water where it needs to for treatment. Or it's really challenging to build a facility that will also allow for access and maintenance, which is part of what we have to do for all of these facilities. Or maybe that it would result in an impact to something like a wetland or other protected area. We also included some situations where we've got projects that are very safety oriented, like ADA improvements, ramp improvements. These are mostly modifying existing impervious area. There might be some incidental new impervious area, like perhaps there's a median that they have to get rid of in order to expand the ramp to be ADA compliant. So we've put this to that category as well. There's a couple options in this. It's the fee in lieu, but also in some cases with subdivisions when they can't treat a particular area, but they can treat some impervious area offsite that's already existing and untreated, that they can treat that. And so they're basically treating an area that they're having difficulty treating with an area that they can treat, still getting the same amount of treatment or retention in this case.
So what happens in the fee in lieu case? Does that?
So I'm not going to go real deep into fee in lieu this evening, but basically the permitting jurisdiction collects that fee in lieu and then uses that money to build some sort of retention treatment to mitigate for that impact. And they're within the permit, there are requirements for how far from the site it can be. It needs to be within, I think it's the same HUC 12. So that's the basic concept, is the jurisdiction takes money and then implements the project.
It's like trading carbon credits.
It's like what?
It's like trading carbon credits. If you can't do it, someone else will do it for you.
Yeah. The public jurisdiction. So then we look at infiltration feasibility, and really I think the permit is designed where full infiltration is the ideal, and that works really well if you have those AB type soils that are, again, the sandy or silty loam soils that will allow water to move into them quickly. We've created what we kind of created a cutoff of about 1 inch per hour or greater as qualifying for this as an infiltration rate, as qualifying for this full infiltration category. In these situations, you would want to conduct infiltration testing to see just how fast the water can move through the soils you have on your site. We did kind of put an upper limit to that as well, so that I think the maximum that you can assume is or use is 2 inches per hour. Facilities would be unlined so that the water that moves through them can get back into that native soil. And they're sized such that that entire design storm can get into the native soil. Much more likely in our area are situations where we have these CD soils or the clayey soils. Water doesn't want to move into those. So that situations where we have an infiltration rate of 1 inch per hour or less. Again, these are unlined facilities, but we're not anticipating that the entire design storm is likely to be infiltrated in these cases. So what we do is we assume a sizing, or we assume a infiltration rate of a half an inch per hour. What that does is allows you to apply some sizing, not do a infiltration testing, and rely on mapped soils. Both these types of facilities provide treatment for the entirety of that design storm, so that pollutant removal is happening in both cases. This is a table from the current draft. And I'm not going to go real deep into this. There's a lot of numbers up here, but you can see on the top left-hand corner, that's 0.5 is that 0.5 inches per hour infiltration rate. And then beneath that, you see a sizing factor of 4.2%. What that sizing is a percentage of the impervious area that you have to manage from your site. So that's either created impervious area or modified impervious area. So for a planter, it's 4.2% sizing factor. When you get into the rain gardens, depending on the slopes you have and how big the bottom is, because of that geometry, they can end up being a bigger sizing factor. This is the simplified method. There's also a way to actually calculate it for the specifics of your facility that you're designing. So the third thing in this sort of how much infiltration should happen on site is where should we prohibit infiltration? And there are some situations where it's just not a good idea. Places that could have landslides, steep slopes, shallow bedrock, shallow groundwater, or maybe contaminated soils where you just don't want to put that water into the native soil. So if you can't provide infiltration, then it's that treatment piece. And these green facilities look a lot like the infiltration facilities. Really, the main difference is that they've got something lining the bottom of them so that water doesn't move into the native soil. That can be anything from a plastic liner to it's got a concrete bottom. The facilities still end up being sized such that they treat that entire design storm. This table shows a simplified sizing factor for both planters and rain gardens when you've got treatment only requirement. And you can see it's 1.4% of the impervious area created or modified for that planter. If you're unable to do the green infrastructure, there are situations where gray infrastructure ends up being allowed, and this still provides treatment, but it's doesn't have the plants and it doesn't have infiltration. Some of the situations where it would be allowed is possibly where infiltration is prohibited and that green infrastructure doesn't work. There might be zoning and land use constraints. I know one kind of easy example is Hillsborough Airport has been concerned in the past about creating vegetation in open water that's a bird attractant and becomes dangerous for planes that are landing and taking off. Access and maintenance constraints can play in. Sometimes you just can't make access work, and maintenance for any facility, green or gray, is essential. And then again, where you might have a protected natural feature. So sort of the last piece to this, and maybe the question I've received the most so far is about how implementation of this is going to work. This question most frequently comes from an applicant that's in process or about to submit, and they want to know, is their project midstream going to have to change standards? And the answer is no. The way that we usually implement our standards is that we say, if you have submitted for land use with whatever jurisdiction you're working through, prior to the effective date, in this case, it'll be November 1st, then you would continue under the previous standard. If you make your application after November 1, then that new standard would apply. So that's the end of my presentation. Just a couple of reminders that there is going to be another draft probably later this summer. There will be a formal public hearing with the board in the fall. We'll accept comments at any time. If you scan this QR code, it's going to take you to our project specific webpage, and that's where you can get any of the latest information, including the drafts.
Thanks, Damon. Any further questions for Damon on the presentation?
Who maintains the green filtration, like the plants stuff? I'm not gonna lie, I mean, I've seen some real bad ones that are like they're full of milkweeds, there's blackberries, and is that like your guys' job, or who does that?
Well, like everything else, it's not as simple as that. In part, yes. So for the unincorporated areas and the cities that don't implement the local program, all the public facilities are maintained by Clean Water Services. In those larger cities where they do implement the local program, they maintain those public facilities. But you can also have private facilities, and private facilities mostly are only serving a single lot. So the runoff is only coming from a single lot. Most of them are commercial sites. However, there are a number of single family residential that have these throughout our jurisdiction and our partner cities as well. Those get maintained by the property owner, and Clean Water Services and our partner cities have programs where they go out and at a minimum visit those facilities once every 4 years. Some of the cities, and I think Hillsborough is one of them, actually does it on a 2-year rotation.
It seems like you guys put so much work into like design and implementing and whether it'll work or not. And I don't know, I guess I just feel like there should be more about how they look or what's growing in them, and stuff like that. I know that adds like a whole nother dimension, but yeah.
Well, it's important what grows in them. Survivability of the plants matter. Certain plants are more effective than others. And aesthetics matter too. Clean Water Services doesn't have aesthetic requirements, but some of the cities have aesthetic requirements around the facilities. So, but we have an entire crew that's what they do. So they go around and they maintain these vegetated facilities.
Projects I work on are very concerned about the aesthetics. Sure. They want to keep them up because it keeps the project up. So they want to put the active plants in it, and it's a big deal because it's a big part of the area. I've got 112. I think we got 5 acres of it at 12 Sherwood Quarters. They want to keep it up, so it's expensive.
Oh, but I think of, I guess, I drive by Mountainside High School, on their fields, and they're like, it's like now like a blackberry patch,
Really?
right? And
Is that the school district?
Those along the street are probably, I think, the city of Edgerton. Anyway, the school district might have some on property. I'm not certain.
Thank you.
I may be permitted. So I understand, and I also looked into the details of your prioritized. Is there at any point or anywhere some kind of a cost benefit analysis done? Except particularly for business, the builders and so on. You have a priority, but does it jive with them? Does it make sense to them in terms of cost versus benefit?
Right, so for a specific application or project, how does cost benefit factor into that?
Yeah.
I think that probably for a lot of applicants, that's a big consideration about their project and what will work for them and I think the space that it takes up with a vegetated facility is part of that cost benefit analysis. The permit has language that specifically says that cost, while it can be a factor, it can't be the sole reason for not doing the prioritization of the green infrastructure or the retention. So it can be a factor, but not the sole reason.
Example you gave of is for airport, or I remember the police, the public safety building was being constructed. They had I know we went back and forth on that gas station that was there in one corner and that. So in those cases, there must be some, okay, we understand the cost and we understand the benefit. This is what you can take rather than go through our priority order.
Yeah, I think that's where the land use piece fits in there as well. Almost every project, it's not just a single item. It's not just the stormwater. You have all these various competing requirements and things that you need to include and how all those fit together. So frequently, part of that alternatives analysis is thinking about what are the other things that need to fit on the site in order for it to work, both for the applicant, but also meet all the various requirements that are out there.
Last thing that I want to say is create the application for an AI application. Have this document reading there. Get your requests or applications in a specific format. Yeah.
Mark, do you have a question?
Sorry, was that for me?
Yes.
Yep. I apologize if I missed it earlier in the presentation, but in terms of the new standards that are in the draft, comparing them with the existing standards, what is the net difference in water quality for water that will go through a system that is currently out there and built compared with the new standards that will be implemented in this draft? How much more will the water quality improved having gone through facilities that are built with new standards?
It's a little bit apples and oranges because it's not that the treatment will be less, it's that storm that's designed for treatment, the goal is to try to get that water back into the native ground rather than into the piped conveyance system. So it's not as, the requirement isn't as much about providing different or better treatment, but that retention piece, getting it to infiltrate.
So do I understand correctly that the net effect on water quality on a given piece of property hasn't been assessed as part of this effort? Like if I've got 10 acres I'm trying to develop in Bethany versus 10 acres in, wherever under new or old standards, I'm just trying to understand what is the net outcome for water quality as a result of instituting these new standards?
Krista, gonna call on you, sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
Something you can speak to under the permit a little bit.
yeah, I mean, it's really going to depend on the specific site. The best way you can address water quality is getting the water into the ground. And the old standards didn't require that. You could just have a treatment facility that would treat it and keep moving it along the way. And you're only treating 80%. And the treatment isn't 100% effective. You're reducing some pollutants, but not all in that treatment. But if you get it into the ground, it's 100% treatment of that water quality design storm. So in clean water services jurisdiction, you have a lot of soils where you're not going to be able to infiltrate it, but new standards are still requiring where you can, where it's not feasible, to have open bottoms. And so it's really maximizing to the extent that you can, getting water back into the ground. It just improves the ultimate treatment, the ultimate pollutant load reduction compared to before, which was really just focused on treatment and not retention, not infiltration. But
Okay,
it's
thank
really
you.
it's really hard to quantify without looking at each individual site. There may be some sites where it doesn't make a difference because you have infeasibility criteria and clay soils and end up doing this same, with the old standards. It's just going to be really site specific.
Yeah, I get that. Hopefully there's been some assessment of overall improvement by implementing new standards. The follow-up to that, I guess, and maybe it's related to the question that was just asked a second ago, is what is the net impact to developers or property owners under the existing standards going to the new standards? What have we estimated what the net impact will be on a 1 acre piece, 5 acre, 10, whatever, or an individual lot, so that we can understand what the potential likely additional expense is for property owners?
We're going to be working on that to release with the second informal draft. So it's coming.
Okay. And then I guess one last one. Will there be any ROI, not ROI, will there be any assessment of, well, maybe it is ROI on, an assessment of if it costs this much, if it costs 10 times what the actual benefit is that the right way to proceed? Will there be any assessment of that type of look at the new proposed standards relative to how much they're going to cost?
We haven't planned for that exactly. Because our primary driver in this case is the permit requirement. So I guess you could consider different methods for meeting the retention requirement, but you would still need to meet a retention requirement. At this point, we haven't done an evaluation of cost of different retention methodologies.
Yeah, I would certainly like to see something like that worked into this effort.
And two, on the cost, on the
Oh, sure, if you've got
benefit piece, the 80% of average annual runoff actually came from a cost benefit kind of a long time ago, where jurisdictions, because DEQ, I mean, if they said treat everything or treat 100% of everything or infiltrate 100% of everything, it would cost tons. So there was a cost evaluation on like, where's the knee of the curve where you want to get pollutants, but you don't want to break the bank. And so there was an analysis done with DEQ in partnership to look at where is that knee of the curve where, and it showed once you get to 80%, treating 80% of the runoff, once you start going above that, the costs really increase significantly. I mean, once, putting in a facility has a certain sort of base cost, regardless how big it is. And then once you start making it bigger and bigger, there was just like a curve. So there was a little bit, to answer your question before, of a cost benefit analysis to get to that design storm that is representing 80% of average annual runoff. And the other thing I'll say is, like, this is coming from the permit, and we've had to do a lot of analyses on to meet permit requirements. There's other large analyses we have to do to show the treatment that we're getting from all of our programs, from post-construction, erosion control, everything, to meet our in-stream requirements. And as we've been doing those analyses over the years, that's where they're finding, you know, well, if we do this, we're going to be more effective. And that's kind of where the infiltration is coming from, is it's like there's a realization that you can only get so far with just this treatment. You know, it's only so effective. You're not going to get 100% treatment. And there was a realization that the more we do infiltration, the better our discharges will be. We'll be reducing more. It's more bang for the buck to get the loads out. But again, it is just really site specific, but they have been looking program wide at the effectiveness, and that's why it's gone in this direction of filtration. And the other piece is that you have this hydromodification standard too, that actually probably has a bigger impact than the water quality, and hopefully developers can use the same facility and try and accomplish both goals. So it won't be like a complete add-on to do this.
Yeah, and if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying it's the biggest bang for the buck for CWS. That you're not saying for property owners or landowners, is that right?
Well, I think just looking program wide, yes. How can we, well, it's the biggest bang for the buck to get a water quality benefit, to reduce pollutants.
And the 80% number is driven from that, what's required in the.
Correct.
We can't play with that.
On water quality requirement, that's explicit. So we've also got a need to do a report out from the subcommittee before we get to the public comment period, and we want to make sure that we leave time for that. So Elaine, you were chosen for that honor.
It was indeed. I was volunteered.
Very clearly.
We had a good meeting on the last meeting. Much of what we saw and discussed, you saw in the presentation tonight. I think the most valuable part of that last meeting was that we had a lot of back and forth, a lot of questions of different types from different interests among the subcommittee, and just had a really good discussion. That's about all I have to say about it.
Thanks, Elaine. Okay, we'll now call for public comment on the design standards. A reminder that each person has up to 5 minutes to speak. Katie will be your timekeeper. Shannon, is there anyone in the room or online signed up by calls?
There's no one in the room. You haven't heard of anyone online who would like to give comments. Is there anyone online who would like to provide a comment?
Okay, seeing none, we'll now welcome any members of the public who would like to provide public comment on any topic pertaining to clean water services. We'll have up to 2 minutes, and Katie will again be your timekeeper. Seeing none, announcements and adjournment. Elizabeth, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Song. Just a few updates for folks. Thank you for the great conversation this evening. We will not be meeting in July. Please enjoy your summers. We are working on scheduling a river panel for August, so keep your eyes on email for some dates. coming up. We're working with 12 River Keepers to coordinate. We didn't do this last year. So it will be nice to return folks onto the river, which is the kind of central driving force of why we do the work that we do.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, there being no further business this evening, CWAC is adjourned. See everyone in August.
I have a question before you started. So with the recent elections, there's been a little change in the board. Thing to do about it, how to act with them.
We had the primary, and we know that next year, Felicity Monteblanco will step into the District 2 role. But we have runoffs for the chair seat and for the District 4 seat. And so for us, it just means thinking about how to acclimate new members or candidates over the summer and introduce them to Clean Water Services for those that are not familiar. And then really our current board has been very intentional about onboarding and wanting to make sure that whoever is going to be stepping into their very big shoes has the best opportunity and education possible to hit the ground running. And so we're actually working in concert with the county to figure out what's the best way to help ramp them up. As you all have sort of harkening back to the beginning of our conversation, right? This is kind of a complicated place. And we do some pretty technical stuff. And so, we're getting to warm up with Raheem and get him onboarded and ramped up here. And we'll be doing that with new board members. But yeah, there's still a lot to be decided this fall by the voters.
For the river board partner.
We will invite the board to the river paddle.
Already new board.
The existing board will be invited to the panel. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Thanks.